Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are unpacking a really fascinating framework about cosmic conflict. We're looking at a presentation that asks a huge foundational question. Why exactly does the Christian church face opposition in the world? We're going to objectively break down the arguments and the specific biblical texts used to build this high-stakes worldview. So, let's jump right in. The entire presentation hinges on this one core question. Why is the church under attack? It introduces a worldview that is completely defined by cosmic tension. According to this perspective, we aren't just talking about a social organization or a local club. The church is framed as an entity locked in an active, ongoing conflict with an ultimate enemy, Satan. The premise here is that this enemy absolutely hates the church and is actively seeking to destroy it. It really sets the stage for a dramatic narrative of spiritual warfare. To really anchor this idea, the source points straight to a famous verse. Matthew 16:18. Notice the dual claim happening here. First off, it freely acknowledges that the gates of hell will come against the church. There's going to be intense opposition. But second, it establishes the ultimate impossibility of that opposition actually succeeding. Satan hates the church and wants to wipe it out. But according to this theological claim, he fundamentally cannot. To explain this cosmic opposition, the presentation builds its argument on four distinct pillars: purchased by God, protected by God, promoting godliness, and publishing the gospel. Let's walk through them one by one. Starting with pillar 1, purchased by God, the ultimate shift in ownership. This whole first point is all about possession. Jesus explicitly called it my church. Using John 10:10, the presentation sets up a really stark contrast. On one side, you have the thief, representing Satan, who comes to steal and destroy. On the other side, God provides abundant life. The argument here is that at the moment of salvation, God literally plucks believers right out of the enemy's grasp. And as you can imagine, that massive shift in ownership, it fuels some incredible jealousy. And this isn't framed as a temporary arrangement either. Matthew 10 promises eternal life and firmly states that no one will snatch them out of my hand, emphasizing that the Father is greater than all. Just think about the frustration of the enemy in this scenario. Once someone is securely in that grasp, complete control is lost. That loss of control essentially becomes the primary fuel for the hatred we're talking about. Now, the presentation argues this conflict isn't just some abstract idea. It's deeply historical. It traces this timeline of repeated, totally unsuccessful attempts to thwart God's plan throughout the life of Jesus. From the enemy trying to kill Jesus right at his birth, to multiple attempts during his earthly ministry around 30 AD, right up to Pilate's Hall and the cross in 33 AD. It's a historical pattern. The source uses this mini-narrative to explain why that exact same hatred is now directed at the church today. Wrapping up this first pillar, Revelation 12 is used to reveal the psychological state of the enemy. This passage paints a picture of ultimate victory for believers, triumphing by the blood of the Lamb. But it also explicitly points out that Satan has been thrown down to earth and is, quote, filled with fury because he knows that his time is short. The sheer intensity of this spiritual warfare stems from desperation. The enemy knows he's already been defeated. Throughout the source material, we keep hitting this recurring anchor phrase, Satan wants to destroy the church because. It acts like a rhythmic drumbeat, transitioning us incredibly smoothly from the concept of divine ownership right into the second pillar. Pillar 2, protected by God, an unstoppable force. So if the first pillar was about who the church belongs to, this one is all about the invisible shield surrounding it. Take a look at Acts chapter 5. This is the famous account of Gamaliel, a Pharisee who basically advised the religious council to just leave the early Christians alone. His logic was super simple. If this movement is just of human origin, it'll eventually fail. But if it is actually from God, you will not be able to overthrow them. This is used to demonstrate that movements genuinely protected by God absolutely cannot be dismantled by any earthly or spiritual opposition, no matter how powerful it seems. And back we go to our core anchor, Satan wants to destroy the church because. This steady repetition sets us up perfectly to talk about how the church practically behaves. Pillar 3, promoting godliness, reflecting the divine. This is where things get really interesting. The presentation actually pivots here from the church's status to its everyday actions. Simply desiring to live righteously makes you a target. 2 Timothy 3:12 doesn't say persecution is just a distinct possibility. It guarantees it for everyone who wants to live a godly life. By actively promoting holiness and righteousness, the church essentially paints a giant bullseye on its own back. The core idea here is all about reflection. If the church is a reflection of God, well, promoting godliness is basically promoting God himself, in a world that the source frames as fundamentally opposed to him. By acting as a mirror of divine holiness, the church inherently and unavoidably invites conflict. So the hostility isn't just about what the church does, it's heavily about who the church reflects. One last time, we hear that rhythm. Satan wants to destroy the church because, and that leads us right into our final and perhaps most action-oriented argument. Pillar 4, publishing the gospel, spreading the word. If promoting godliness is how the church lives internally, publishing the gospel is what it shouts to the outside world. Look at this historical account from Acts 13. The early Christians were seeing huge success. The word was spreading widely. But man, that success triggered instant, severe backlash. Religious and civic leaders were incited to persecute Paul and Barnabas, expelling them right out of the region. The takeaway is that publishing the gospel disrupts the status quo, and that immediately triggers opposition from those in power. The presentation then pulls this ancient history right into the modern day, looking at everyday church activities, passing out tracts, soul winning, supporting missionaries, and even just showing up for Sunday worship. You know, to an outsider, attending a Wednesday night potluck and prayer service might seem totally harmless, maybe a little mundane. But within this specific worldview, these are viewed as frontline acts of spiritual warfare. A church that engages in these simple, quiet acts of faith is deeply hated and targeted as a major threat. And finally, our conclusion, rejoicing in trials, the final perspective. Here we see this absolutely fascinating shift in the whole narrative arc. After all this heavy reality regarding spiritual attacks and intense opposition, 1 Peter 4 comes in and completely flips the script. It tells believers not to be surprised by the fiery ordeal. Instead of looking at these heavy trials and feeling confused or defeated, the instruction is incredibly counterintuitive. Believers are told to literally rejoice because facing these attacks means we're actively participating in the sufferings of Christ. So, according to this framework, insults and trials, they aren't signs of defeat at all. They are tangible proof of the Spirit's power resting on that community. Opposition is not a badge of failure, but a really profound badge of spiritual endorsement. It leaves us with an incredibly provocative question derived straight from the source. Within this worldview, if you aren't facing opposition, are you even doing the work? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking questions and keep exploring the deeper frameworks behind the texts we read. See you next time.